This is Ashley from Murder Mash. And tonight I'm going to be reading a short, scary story. Another one from the book Tales for the Midnight Hour by J.B. Stamper. Tonight's story is called The 10 Claws. Long ago, a small village was plagued by a monster. The monster had never been seen nor heard, and never left tracks or evidence. The only proof of its existence was its victims. The victims were always killed in the same way. 10 jagged holes would be found in their necks. At first, the monster attacked only small animals. A farmer woke one morning to find that 3 of his sheep had bled to death. Then 3 pet dogs in the village were found dead with the same strange claw marks in their necks. Rumors circulated in the village. Everyone heard about the animals, but no one could give a logical explanation for what had killed them. Next, a young calf was found dead. It had bled to death too, its jugular vein punctured by the 10 mysterious holes. After this, men began to arm themselves. Shotguns were set beside beds at night. Animals were kept locked in the barns. Throughout the village, a rash of hysteria broke loose. People put forth all kinds of wild speculation. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion. Then it happened, what everyone had really feared. The monster attacked a human. Elmer Riley, the town drunk. Elmer was found dead one morning with the 10 claw holes in his neck. He had died just like the sheep and the dogs and the calf. He had bled to death. Not many people in the town really cared that Elmer was dead, but it scared them to know that the monster had an appetite for humans as well. Anyone could be its prey. The men in the village banded together to form a vigilante group. They didn't know what they were fighting, which made things even worse. Robert and John Harmon, 2 brothers, were appointed head of the vigilante committee. They lived on the outskirts of the village near the forest where most people thought the monster lived. The 2 brothers knew how the monster attacked. It had been their calf that was killed. After the first meeting of the vigilante committee, Robert and John Harmon went home to discuss their plans. They sat around the oak table in the kitchen with their father. Their old grandmother sat by the fireplace on a low chair, her black shawl wrapped around her. "We must begin the watch tonight," Robert said in a low voice. "The other men are afraid to act now, but I think tonight is the time to be on guard." "You're right," his brother agreed. "The thing, whatever it is, strikes every 5 days. It was 5 nights ago that Elmer Riley was killed." "You boys sound brave," their father interrupted, "but remember what you are dealing with. The thing seems to attack without warning. In the killing so far, there were no signs of struggle. How will you know what to watch for?" The father paused and looked over to the old mother sitting by the fireplace. "They should be careful, shouldn't they, Granny?" The old woman looked up at her son. She shuddered for a moment and then fell silent again. The 3 men went back to their conversation. They hadn't really expected to get an answer from her. Her mind had been foggy for years. Robert began to outline his plan to his father. "John and I will both take our guns to the outskirts of the forest tonight. We'll set ourselves up on the path between the forest and the village. If the monster comes out tonight, it will have to pass by either of us." "And what protection will you have?" the father asked worriedly. "Each other," Robert answered. "We'll stay within shouting distance of each other, and we'll keep our backs to the village so that we face the forest and the monster." "Someone has to do it," John said to his father. "We don't know who the next victim will be. We can't just sit back and let the monster kill us off, one by one." Their father stood up from the table and walked around the room once. Then he shook each of their hands. "Come back to me alive," he said, his voice choking. The 2 sons picked up their rifles from the floor. Robert pulled a long, sharp machete from off the wall. As they left the room, both of them walked over to their old grandmother and kissed her goodbye. Outside, the night was nearly pitch black. A thin silver moon hung low in the western sky. They walked east toward the forest. As they drew near to where they had planned to station themselves, John whispered, "I wonder what it looks like." "I've been thinking," Robert said, "that it could be a bird. A giant bird that swoops down on you and digs its claws into your neck." They both looked up into the night sky. Clouds had shrouded the thin moon. It would be hard to see a dark shadow descending from the sky. "I thought it might tunnel under the ground like a huge weasel," John said softly. "Then it comes out a taxi from behind." Both brothers felt the skin crawl on the backs of their necks. Slowly they both turned and looked behind them. For several minutes they stood together like that in the dark, paralyzed by their own horrible thoughts. "We must take our places," Robert said finally. "But remember, stay within shouting distance." The two brothers moved off in the opposite directions. They had agreed that each would take 20 long paces and then stop. Standing in the dark, Robert carefully cocked his gun. Then he took the machete and stacked it in the soft ground by his feet. He waited. 40 paces away, John fumbled nervously with his gun. He felt his hands shaking. Could he use the gun if he had to? He wished he could see Robert, but his brother was obscured by the dark shadows of bushes and trees. John turned around to look toward the village. He wished he were safe inside the house. Then he heard the crackling of a twig in the back of him. He spun around to face the forest, but he saw nothing and heard no more. John relaxed. He set the butt of his gun down on the ground and leaned against it. He started to feel drowsy. Then he felt the 10 claws digging into his neck. A terrified scream echoed throughout the forest to Robert. He grabbed his gun and machete and followed the awful screams to his brother. He drew near but couldn't see anything in the dark. But then he heard John's voice choking and desperate. "Quick! Swing the machete behind where you hear my voice! Hurry!" Robert threw down his gun and grasped the machete in both hands. He swung it above his head and let it fall. It made a hacking sound before it hit the ground. John had been groaning the whole time, but now he stopped. For an instant, Robert thought he had killed his brother, but then John started to babble incoherently. Robert thought he had heard something moving back away from them. It sounded like a giant rat scuttling over the dead leaves, but he could not see it. He fell down on the ground by his brother's body. Moaning again, John took his brother's hand and put it to his own neck. Robert shrunk back at what he felt. It was a hand, a withered hand with sharp, pointed claws. He had hacked it off the monster with the machete, and it was still stuck in John's neck. Robert jerked the foul claws from his brother's neck. Then he bound the 10 bloody holes with his handkerchief. He carried his brother back to the village, leaving the withered hand lying on the forest floor. Their father met them at the door, weeping with fear. He had heard John's terrified screams in the forest. Now he wept with happiness to see that both of his sons were alive. They laid John on a couch and washed out the claw marks in his neck. They could see that a few seconds more and the claws would have killed him. As he bandaged his brother's neck, Robert thought about the monster. He hoped it was in the forest now, dying a slow death. All this time, no one had noticed that the old woman was gone from her spot by the fireplace, and no one noticed when she came in through the back door and sat down there again. From her low seat, she looked over to Robert and John. No one heard the hiss that came from her wrinkled mouth, and no one saw the bloody stump that she hid under the black shawl. The end.